These are the best and the worst guns in Apex Legends Season 18. Now I know this can be quite a controversial topic, but I really thought about this and based my opinion on the guns I'm seeing used the most so far versus the least this season and my own experience I've had with them. Also taking into consideration that all the guns in Apex are viable depending on the situation you're in and who is using them depending on your or their skill level. Now just before we get into this, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and comment your thoughts about what you think the best guns are this season, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future uploads and streams. I'm on the long road to 1,000 subscribers and would really appreciate it. Now starting off from worst to best, in D tier we have the P2020. Now there have been no changes to this weapon in Season 18 and unfortunately it's just not that good. And the only time you find yourself using it is if you have no other option when you can't find any other gun off drop. And you also better make sure you've done your finger exercises too, because you're gonna need a fast trigger finger. Okay, so next up in D tier we have the longbow. Maybe some of you might disagree with this choice, but for me it's a gun I myself don't use too often and probably the weakest sniper in the game. It can still deliver good damage, but I feel like it's just a little clunky at times, and when picking up weapons the longbow isn't just a gun I'd be looking for. I think maybe if they gave the longbow a buff in the mid-season or any time in the future it would be cool to see, but as it stands there are just a lot of better guns than it so far and that's why I think it belongs here in D tier. Moving on to C tier, at the bottom we have the Devotion. I will say that a fully kitted golden Devotion is very good and can lay down some serious firepower, but I think if you were to go out of your way to find all the attachments for the base gun, it would take a bit too long and it wouldn't be worth your while in the end. Also to mention, the base gun's recoil is very unpredictable and the build up to fire rate which can let you down if you're in a pinch and you need to get shots off quickly. As well as being an LMG, giving it the slowest movement and strafe speed, which gives it even more of a disadvantage. There are a lot of guns that I would choose over it and that's why I've placed it at the bottom of C tier. Next up we have the Triple Take. Here's a controversial placement some of you might disagree with, and even though this gun did get a buff last season and is very viable for mid to long range engagements, even for some close range engagements because the bullet spread is similar to a shotgun's, it's more of a personal preference that when I use the Triple Take I can just never find that sweet spot and find myself hitting 19s and 21s in damage, which leaves me frustrated and I feel sometimes more comfortable using different guns. But don't get me wrong, I've seen some clips of this thing in action and it can do some serious damage. Next we have the Mozambique, which is currently in the crafter for the first half of this season, but I don't think too many people will be crafting it. But if you decide in doing so, it comes with the hop up hammer points, which aids its damage to flesh health and can actually be swapped over to the RE45, which I've never been able to do before with weapons out of the crafter. It has a fast fire rate, decent range and decent damage, but I do think this is more of an off drop kind of weapon and can't compete with some of the more powerful guns in the game. Up next is the RE45. Now this in my opinion is another starter off drop kind of weapon that can really melt enemies with white shields. I do think though that this gun really starts coming to its own once it has an extended mag on it coupled with hammer points. Being a pistol gives it the fastest movement and strafe speed in the game, helping out in close range gunfights, but not many people including myself are running the RE45 mid to late game as it won't stand up well to most of the other weapons. It would be nice to see a little buff as I think it really could change the dynamic up, but we'll just have to wait and see. Next in C tier is the Rampage. Now in this season that the Rampage has left the crafter, I've seen a lot more of it in use throughout games. This weapon shines when you can catch an enemy out in the open and punish them for it, as it has a nice hard hitting consistent rate of fire. If you get this gun fully kitted and put a thermite in it, I would probably say it would belong in A tier for its faster fire rate. But putting that aside, because it's an LMG, it does have that slower movement speed and fire rate without that thermite, so if an enemy isn't out in the open and behind cover, it will be a lot harder to get big damage on them and close quarters fighting will feel clunky. The second best gun in C tier has to be the Sentinal. This is by far one of my all-time favourite guns in the game for the pure satisfaction of getting kills with it. Charge this thing up with a shield cell and it can do almost as much damage as a Kraber. This gun is also such a good gun to get off drop if you're confident with it, as it's a 2-shot down on a white shield. What does let this gun down is that it is the only bolt action sniper, which means if you miss a shot in a situation you really can't afford to, you're most likely going to get killed. It's a high risk, high reward kind of weapon and that's why I like it. Lastly, the best gun in C tier would probably have to be the EVA 8. It feels much better this season, and I know they did buff it halfway through last season during the Horizon Collection event, and it made the fire rate faster for the base weapon and the weapon when it has a white shotgun bolt. If you're within 5 meters of your enemy, the EVA 8 can really do its thing and can 3-pump enemies very easy. What lets the gun down is that if you're not within that range, it will feel like you're just peppering them and you will most likely get outgunned. Moving on to B tier. First up is the 30-30 with that dual shell hop up built in to increase reload speed times. It has a really high damage potential with its charging up of shots. It's not as inconsistent in terms of damage, let's say, compared to the triple take, and it has moderately accurate hipfire. The best way to run the 30-30 in my opinion is paired with an SMG so you have more of a flexible gun in closer ranges. Next in line for B tier is the Alternator. This gun has come a long way since the last season now that disruptor rounds have been added as a hop up, giving the Alternator 25% more shield damage to enemies, which is quite crazy if you ask me. It has a nice steady rate of fire, which means it is easy to control, and with the extended mag in the Alternator coupled with the disruptor rounds, I'd rather be the one using it in a fight. Another good gun in B tier is the HAVOC. Using this gun in close range fights can absolutely shred, there's no doubt. But as an AR, you do need it to be viable at medium to long ranges, where the HAVOC does struggle. Putting the turbocharger on this weapon helps with getting a quick draw on an enemy in close ranges. But like I said, medium to long range engagements, the recoil is a little funny, and for that reason it wouldn't be my go-to AR. Next up in line we have the Spitfire. They buffed the hipfire spread, they improved the ADS recoil, and brought back barrel stabilizers for it again, which helps with its recoil altogether, but especially at range. With an extended mag, the Spitfire feels like the gun has a never-ending rate of fire, and you can easily perch up and mow enemy teams down with this thing. The only thing that lets it down is obviously being an LMG. It has a slower movement speed, but the buffs definitely made up for that. Coming in third on B tier is the Volt SMG. Maybe not everyone can agree, but although it might not be the best SMG in the game in terms of damage output, the minimal recoil allows you to stay on target while hitting the majority of your shots. It's my favourite energy weapon in the game, so I do pick it up quite often. The Volt can get outgunned by the Car or R99, but it is still a contender to be rivaled with. Second in B tier, I have the G7 Scout. This in my opinion is the best marksman rifle in the game, and if you want to sit back and poke teams, putting them under pressure and even get consistent knocks while doing it, this is the weapon for you. The 3x scope and an extended mag is the best way forward, and although the double tap trigger was taken off it as a hop up, that still doesn't change the damage it can cause in a fight. First on the B tier list is the R301. This all-time classic still holds its own all the way up to season 18, despite a few nerfs it's had on the way. This is one of my go-to guns, where it might not be the gun that puts out the most damage, but its easy recoil control allows for you to melt shields on enemies with ease, especially with an extended mag. Moving on to A tier now, starting off with the charge rifle and its brand new rework. It now takes a bit more skill to use, but provides a big reward to those who want to try and master it. Now also having to hold down the trigger and release to fire feels a little bit different, but once you get the hang of it, it doesn't seem too bad. This is also the way the original charge rifle was in Titanfall, which I think is a nice little touch. I'd like to see a few comments below on this one, as there are a lot of mixed feelings about the charge rifle. Next up now in A tier we have the FLATLINE. The FLATLINE is a heavy hitting AR, and I do really enjoy using this gun with a bruiser on it. It's a little more tricky to use than the R301, but definitely pays off with its higher damage output. In my opinion, because I'm on controller, it feels very good in the short to medium ranges, but I struggle a little in the recoil and longer ranges, but other than that it's a top pick for me. Next we have the HEMLOCK. It's just come out the care package, which I think a lot of people are happy about as it's a fan favourite. It's not as powerful as it was in the care package, but they have buffed its pre-care package version. I also think it's the best hipfire out of all the ARs, and we'll probably see a lot more of the HEMLOCK now throughout season 18. Above the HEMLOCK I would have to put the R99. This gun is still a menace this season, even after the nerf it received alongside the other SMGs. It now has a slower strafe speed and its ammo capacity has now been reduced, but it still has an insane rate of fire with an extended mag, which I may add you cannot run the R99 without. Another high risk high reward gun coming up now is the WINGMAN. As always, the WINGMAN is a strong pick this season. I know sometimes we miss more than a couple of shots in a row with the WINGMAN, but when you do hit your shots it really doesn't mess around. This season you can now have the choice of 2 hop-ups to use with the WINGMAN, either the boosted loader or the skull piercer, which both have great value to the gun depending on how you want to play. Okay, so next up now is the PK, which I think is one of the best weapons to use in season 18 right now. A lot of the reasoning behind this is due to the big nerf that all the SMGs received, meaning that shotguns now have the chance to rise up. The PK can 2-pump enemies with no problems, and if you manage to find disruptor rounds to run with the PK, it hits like an absolute truck. We'll be feeling the PK's presence a lot more this season. You have been warned. Now the third best gun in A tier I think is the Mastiff. Some may disagree because of the PK with the disruptor rounds giving it a big damage boost, but just hear me out. The Mastiff with its slightly quicker rate of fire makes up for the lack of damage it does compared to the PK, especially with a purple bolt. It hits hard as long as you don't miss your shots, and it's a very fun gun to use. I would even say that the Mastiff and PK are quite eye to eye with each other this season. The second best gun in A tier without a doubt is the car SMG. Even after the nerf all the SMGs received, it actually made the car the most powerful, as it has more rounds than the R99 now and its movement wasn't reduced as much as the R99. Currently this is my personal favourite gun in the game, coupled with either an AR or a shotgun. Last but not least on A tier is the almighty Nemesis. I think this is the best AR in the game right now if you're willing to get it out of the crafter. It checks all the boxes for long, medium and short range engagements, and it wasn't even nerfed from last season, which I was surprised about. Maybe we will see nerfs for it in the mid-season update when it comes out of the crafter, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, to finish things off, I've put all the care package weapons in S tier as they are all so good just to keep things a little shorter, but I will go over the only one that was changed, which was the Prowler. They added the select fire hop up toggled on, making it the most insanely broken gun in the game right now, putting out about 500 damage in a single mag, which is just insane. So before we wrap this up, I'll put a screenshot of my list up on the screen for you guys to see, and if you think the tier list should look any different, make sure to comment down below as I'd love to hear your views. Thanks for watching if you got this far, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll catch you on the next one.